My name is Harper, and I am 27 years old. My mother looked at me from the head of the dining table, smiled her perfect hostess smile, and asked me to pass the gravy. She was entirely unaware that the manila envelope sitting under my dinner plate contained 14 pages of IP logs, delivery receipts, and financial statements proving that she and my father had committed felony identity theft against me. She thought she was hosting a picture-perfect holiday. What she didn't know was that dessert was going to be a choice between signing a legally binding confession or watching me hand that envelope to the police. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, the place where ordinary people face impossible toxic family moments and walk out with their peace and their dignity completely intact. If you have ever been the quiet one in your family, the one who does everything right only to be used as a resource for everyone else, this story is for you. Before we get into exactly how I laid this trap, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I absolutely love reading those. To understand how a Thanksgiving dinner becomes a crime scene, I have to take you back to the beginning. You have to understand the specific financial arithmetic of my family. I grew up in a house where keeping up appearances was not just a hobby, it was an extreme sport. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, lived in a beautiful, sprawling colonial house in a neighborhood they could not actually afford. My father was a mid-level sales manager, and my mother was a master at the illusion of wealth. She was the woman with the least luxury SUV, the designer handbags bought on secret credit, and the terrifying ability to judge everyone else's lawn while ours was being paid for with money we didn't have. In our family, there were 2 daughters, and we served 2 very different purposes. My older sister Chloe was the display piece. Chloe was gorgeous, charismatic, and entirely allergic to accountability. My parents funded her existence because she looked good on their Christmas cards. They bought her a car at 16, paid for a private out-of-state college she dropped out of twice, and constantly subsidized her influencer lifestyle. Then there was me. I was the infrastructure. I was the quiet one who did my homework, got a part-time job at 15 so I could buy my own clothes, and learned very early that the best way to survive in that house was to be entirely self-sufficient. I didn't ask for money, because asking for money meant subjecting myself to an hour-long lecture from my father about financial responsibility, a lecture that was incredibly rich coming from a man who financed his golf clubs. I moved out the week I turned 18. I paid my own way through a state university by working full-time at a bank and taking night classes. I graduated with a degree in data analytics, landed a great corporate job, and spent the next 5 years living in a tiny, bare-bones apartment, saving every single penny I could. My goal was simple. I wanted to buy my own house. I wanted a piece of ground that belonged entirely to me, a place where the locks were mine and the peace was permanent. By the time I was 27, I had painstakingly saved $65,000 for a down payment. I was proud. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was ahead of the curve. I found a beautiful little 2-bedroom bungalow with a wraparound porch, put in an offer, and it was accepted. All I had to do was secure the mortgage. That brings me to a Tuesday morning in late September, the day my entire reality fractured. I was sitting in the glass-walled office of my mortgage broker, a kind, older man named David. I had handed over my bank statements, my W-2s, and my employment verification with total confidence. I knew my credit score was pristine. I had never missed a payment on my student loans, and I paid my single credit card off in full every month. David looked at his computer screen. Then he leaned forward, frowned, and clicked his mouse a few times. The silence in the office stretched out, shifting from professional quiet to something heavy and uncomfortable. He took his glasses off and looked at me with an expression that I will never forget. It was pity. "Harper," he said gently, "is there a reason you didn't disclose the $42,000 in revolving credit card debt?" I stared at him. The air in the room suddenly felt entirely too thin to breathe. I told him there must be a mistake. I had one card, and its limit was only $5,000. David turned his monitor around so I could see it. Right there, on my official credit report, were 4 active credit cards, a platinum travel card, a premium retail card, and 2 major bank cards. All of them were maxed out. 2 of them were 90 days past due. My credit score, which should have been in the high 700s, was sitting at a catastrophic 540. I didn't open these, I whispered. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them flat against my knees. David sighed, the sound of a man who had seen this exact tragedy before. Look at the addresses associated with the accounts, Harper. Look at the authorized users. I leaned in. The billing address for every single fraudulent card was my parents' house, and the authorized users listed on the travel card? Richard and Evelyn. My parents. When you discover that your own family has stolen your identity, your brain does a very strange thing. It tries to protect you by offering a dozen innocent explanations. Maybe it's a mix-up. Maybe they thought it was a joint account from when I was a teenager. Maybe it's a bank error. But the data analyst in me, the part of my brain trained to look at raw numbers without emotion, knew the truth instantly. My parents had used my clean Social Security number to fund the lifestyle they could no longer afford on their own. They had literally stolen my future to pay for their present. My mortgage application was denied on the spot. I lost the house. I walked out of David's office, got into my car, and sat in the parking lot for an hour. This is the first major lesson I want to deliver to you today. When you find out a toxic family member has betrayed you, the immediate instinct is to call them, scream, cry, and demand to know how they could do this to you. We want the emotional release of the confrontation, but screaming gives them the advantage. It tells them what you know before you are fully prepared to act on it. It gives them time to build a lie, to shift the blame, to play the victim, and to tell the rest of the family that you are being dramatic or crazy. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text my father. I didn't shed a single tear in that parking lot. Crying would mean I was surprised, and somewhere deep down, I wasn't surprised at all. Instead, I went home, opened my laptop, and went to work. I had been raised as the quiet, capable daughter. They were about to find out exactly how capable I was. For the next 6 weeks, I ran a silent, exhaustive forensic investigation into my own parents. I contacted the fraud departments of all 4 credit card companies. Because the accounts were legally in my name, I had the absolute right to request the detailed transaction histories, the IP access logs, and the shipping addresses for every purchase. What I found in those records was sickening. I found the $4,000 charge for the luxury vacation my parents took to Cabo San Lucas last winter, the one my mother bragged about on Facebook. I found $2,500 in charges at a high-end appliance store for the new espresso machine and double oven sitting in their kitchen. But the worst part was the retail card. There were thousands of dollars in designer clothes, shoes, and jewelry shipped directly to my sister Chloe's apartment. My parents hadn't just stolen from me to fund themselves, they had stolen from me to fund the golden child. I printed every single statement. I highlighted the fraudulent charges in yellow. I cross-referenced the IP addresses used to open the accounts, proving they originated from the router in my parents' living room. I built a timeline. I compiled all of it into a thick, plain manila folder. It wasn't an argument. It was an absolute, undeniable mathematical certainty. Then, I hired a lawyer. I paid a ruthless, brilliant attorney named Marcus $500 for 1 hour of his time. I slid the folder across his desk and asked him what my options were. Marcus looked at the documents and gave it to me straight. Harper, you have a choice. If you file a police report for identity theft, you will be cleared of this debt. Your credit will be restored, but your parents will be arrested. This is grand larceny and wire fraud. They will face felony charges and prison time. He paused, looking at me carefully. If you don't go to the police, you are legally responsible for $42,000. The only way to protect yourself without pressing charges immediately is to have them sign a legally binding, notarized confession admitting to the fraud and legally assuming full responsibility for the debt, which we can then use to force a debt transfer or secure a lien against their assets. I told Marcus to draft the confession. It was a brutal, flawless document. It detailed exactly what they did, how much they stole, and legally bound them to repay the debt in full within 30 days, or the confession would automatically be forwarded to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. By mid-November, the trap was fully set. My folder was complete. And right on cue, my mother texted me an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. Her text was bright, bubbly, and full of emojis. "Harper, we are hosting Thanksgiving this year. Aunt Sarah, Uncle David, and Chloe will be here. I'm making your favorite pie. Can't wait to have the whole family together. Arrive at 4. I read the text while staring at the legal confession sitting on my kitchen counter. They were hosting a lavish holiday dinner for the extended family, likely paying for the turkey and the wine with a credit card bearing my name. I typed back, "I'll be there." Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and crisp. I dressed nicely, but simply. A dark sweater, slacks, and comfortable boots. I wanted to look like someone who was not there to perform, but someone who was there to handle business. I tucked the manila folder into my oversized tote bag and drove to the house I grew up in. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and expensive scented candles. The house was loud with the sounds of my extended family. Aunt Sarah and Uncle David were in the living room drinking wine. Chloe was in the kitchen, holding a glass of Prosecco and recording a video for her social media, showing off the designer boots that I knew for a fact were paid for with my stolen credit. My mother rushed over to me wearing a pristine apron over a silk blouse and wrapped me in a tight, performative hug. "Harper, you made it. Oh, you look so thin. Are you eating?" she cooed, loud enough for Aunt Sarah to hear. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. My father gave me a firm pat on the shoulder. "Good to see you, kiddo. Grab a drink." I didn't grab a drink. I poured myself a glass of tap water. I sat on the edge of the sofa and watched them. I watched them perform the roles of the perfect, affluent, generous parents. I watched Chloe parade around in stolen goods. I watched my aunt and uncle admire the new kitchen appliances. For 2 hours, I sat there, completely calm, holding the quiet power of a woman who knows exactly how a movie is going to end, while everyone else is still enjoying the first act. At 6 p.m., my mother announced that dinner was ready. The dining table was spectacular. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver serving platters. There were 8 of us at the table. My father sat at the head, carving the turkey with immense pride. My mother sat opposite him. I was seated right in the middle, directly across from Chloe. Before we began, my father raised his wine glass. He looked around the table, his chest puffed out. "I just want to say how thankful I am for this family. We've been blessed with so much this year. To family, and to looking out for each other." Everyone raised their glasses. "To family," they echoed. I raised my water glass. I took a sip. I set it down. The meal began. Plates were passed. Aunt Sarah complimented the stuffing. Uncle David started talking about the stock market. About 20 minutes into the dinner, my mother smiled at me from the head of the table. "Harper, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with maternal warmth. "Could you pass the gravy?" I looked at the silver gravy boat sitting near my plate. Then, I looked at my mother. "I can't do that, Mom," I said softly. The table went quiet. The clinking of silverware stopped. My mother's smile faltered, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. "What do you mean you can't? It's right next to you." I reached into my tote bag resting on the floor beside my chair. I pulled out the thick manila folder. I didn't slam it. I didn't throw it. I simply picked up the silver gravy boat, moved it aside, and placed the folder perfectly dead center on the white tablecloth. "I can't pass the gravy," I said, my voice at the exact volume of a normal conversation, "because I am too busy wondering how you plan to pay back the $42,000 you stole from me." The silence that fell over that dining room was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. My father's face went completely slack. The carving knife in his hand actually slipped, clattering loudly against the platter. Chloe's jaw dropped. Aunt Sarah and Uncle David stared at me like I had just spoken in tongues. "Harper, what on earth are you talking about?" my mother stammered, a nervous, high-pitched laugh escaping her throat. Is this some kind of joke? It's Thanksgiving. It's not a joke, Evelyn, I said, using her first name to shatter the maternal illusion. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document and slid it down the table until it rested in front of her. That is the credit report I pulled when my mortgage application was denied, I stated calmly. It shows 4 credit cards opened in my name using my social security number without my knowledge or consent. I pulled out the next stack of papers and slid them toward my father. Those are the IP logs from Capital One and Chase. They legally prove that the applications were submitted from the Wi-Fi router sitting in your living room. I pulled out the third stack and slid it toward the center of the table, right in front of Chloe. And those are the itemized delivery receipts. They show the $4,000 Cabo vacation you two took. They show the $2,500 espresso machine currently sitting on your kitchen counter. And they show the $3,800 in designer clothing shipped directly to Chloe's apartment. I looked directly at my sister, whose face had drained of all color. I hope the boots are comfortable, Chloe, because I paid for them with my credit score. My mother immediately launched into the only defense she knew, performative hysterics. She gasped. She put her hand over her mouth. Tears, the theatrical, hyperventilating kind, sprang to her eyes. How could you do this? She wailed, looking at Aunt Sarah for sympathy. You come into our home on a holiday and accuse us of these terrible things? After everything we've done for you? We gave you a roof? We fed you? You didn't feed me today, Mom. I interrupted smoothly. Capital One did. My father slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal. He was trying to pivot to intimidation. That is enough, Harper. You are disrespecting this family in front of guests. If there's an issue with a credit card, it's a misunderstanding. We were going to pay it back. You have no right to humiliate us. I am not humiliating you, I replied, entirely unfazed by his anger. I am holding you accountable. You committed grand larceny. You committed wire fraud. You stole my ability to buy a home so you could pretend you were rich. Aunt Sarah looked at my mother, her eyes wide with horror. Evelyn, is it true? Did you take out cards in her name? My mother couldn't answer. She just sobbed into her napkin, shaking her head. I reached into the back of the folder and pulled out the final document. It was 3 pages long, printed on premium legal paper, with a blue sticky tab marking the signature line. I placed it in the center of the table alongside a black pen. This, I said, is a legally binding, notarized confession drafted by my attorney. It admits that you fraudulently opened those accounts. It assumes full legal responsibility for the $42,000 balance, and it mandates that the debt must be paid in full within 30 days. I looked at my father, whose bluster had suddenly evaporated. You have 2 choices, I told him. The room was so quiet my voice sounded like a gavel. You can both sign that confession right now, in front of Aunt Sarah and Uncle David as witnesses. If you sign it, I will walk out of here, and you have 30 days to figure out how to liquidate your assets to pay off the bank. If you do not sign it, I continued, tapping the folder, I will leave this house, drive directly to the police station, and file criminal identity theft charges. I have the IP logs. I have the receipts. You will be arrested before the weekend is over, and you will face felony prison time. The entire table stared at me. They had expected the quiet, compliant Harper. They had expected me to absorb the blow, to cry, to let them manipulate the narrative behind closed doors. They had absolutely no idea what to do with a woman who had weaponized a paper trail. You wouldn't do that, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. You wouldn't send Mom and Dad to jail. I turned my head and looked my sister dead in the eyes. Try me. My father looked at the legal document. He looked at the IP logs. He looked at his brother-in-law David, who was staring at him with absolute disgust. The illusion was gone. The performance was over. The house of cards had collapsed onto the Thanksgiving turkey. My father's hand shook as he picked up the pen. He didn't look at me. He signed his name on the blue tab. Then, without a word, he slid the paper and the pen to my mother. She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara, waiting for a final reprieve, waiting for the daughter she had trained to fix things to step in and say it was okay. I gave her nothing. I just waited. My mother signed the confession. I picked up the document, checked the signatures, and slid it carefully back into my tote bag. I stood up from my chair. I didn't throw my napkin. I didn't raise my voice. "Thank you for dinner," I said. I turned around and walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, and out the front door into the freezing November night. When my car doors locked, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 27 years. The fallout was absolute and devastating. Because I held a legally binding confession, they couldn't run from the debt. Within a week, my parents were forced to quietly sell the luxury SUV. By day 20, they had to list the house, the beautiful colonial they had destroyed my credit to maintain. They had to downsize to a small apartment on the other side of town. Chloe had to move out of her luxury building because my parents could no longer subsidize her rent. They paid off the $42,000 entirely. My lawyer filed the fraud packets with the credit bureaus, attaching the confession, and within a few months, the fraudulent accounts were wiped from my credit history. My score rebounded. The following spring, I closed on a different house, a better one. I have not spoken to my parents or my sister since that Thanksgiving. The extended family knows exactly what happened because Aunt Sarah and Uncle David witnessed it. My parents' reputation in their social circle was completely ruined, not because I spread rumors, but because the truth is too heavy to hide. Here is the greatest value I can leave you with today. If you are dealing with a toxic family that uses you, lies to you, or steals from you, whether that is stealing your money, your time, or your peace, you must understand that crying does not stop them. Arguing does not stop them. Begging them to love you the right way does not stop them. The only thing that stops a manipulator is an undeniable boundary backed by facts. The strongest position in any room is never the one screaming the loudest. It is the one holding the undeniable truth on paper. Records do not negotiate. They do not gaslight. They simply tell the truth. Setting boundaries isn't revenge. It is survival. It is choosing to protect yourself when the people who are supposed to protect you decide to sell you for parts. You do not owe your future to people who refuse to build their own. If my story reminded you that you have the right to demand respect and protect your peace, please share this video with someone who needs to hear that message today. Have you ever had to use receipts to shut down a toxic family member? I want to read your stories, so please drop them in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.